So we will reconvene, please. Thank you. 333 Community Care Services Report. Can I have somebody please move that we receive the report? Councillor Gleeson, seconded Councillor Head. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Brett, anybody have anything to add to what's written into the report? Only thing I'll say is that at our last budget workshop, the presentation from the Community Care Services team around the nature of costings that are applied to this and the detailed explanation around the fact that indirect costings is worked not on an actual as cost basis but on a indicative contribution from various elements of our budget. Certainly clarify the indicated profit loss as an indication, not so that's after direct expenses, so indirect overheads is indicative more of than it is an actual cost, but also appreciate the undertaking that we will look to see whether a more significant percentage of those indirect costs can be claimed if possible, and that will be probably more just work ongoing than it will be actual budgetary processes. I think that's more just something that, as we proceed and identify administrative and other savings or other claimables, I guess. So that certainly doesn't necessarily indicate that we're running at $180,000 cash loss, which is quite reassuring, and it does show that the detail in our reporting is vastly more detailed than perhaps 2 years ago. So thank you very much to all officers involved in that. Notwithstanding, we will still also be talking to federal and state government at times to ensure that they're very aware of the fact that we are delivering these services and any extra recognition we can get for that. So, sorry, but back to the beginning. Any other questions? Okay. Just look for that report when it may have had a chance, Councillor, after the one you outlined in the Brett's report. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Report 334. Can I have someone remove that? Sorry. Yep. Councillor Nichols leaving the room. Councillor Plum moves that we receive it. Seconder. Councillor Arthur. Those in favour? Carried 6-0. Can I just have a clarify 9.9, just on the first page of the report, it details there was inconsistencies between the site plan and elevations. The applicant has since requested that a condition of approval be included requiring the elevation plans to be submitted for council approval prior to building certification. So does that mean that the planning department or team will issue an approval with a condition that these plans will be submitted after the fact but prior to building certification? Is that what that means? So instead of them submitting it prior to the approval being given, it'll be after the fact as a condition?
No, it would be before, because the issue here is because it's in the flight path of the runway, the main runway, the airport. So we need those profile plans to make sure that the building doesn't intrude into that airspace.
So just to clarify what you're saying there though, sorry Brett, because the next sentence says that draft conditions, so it says in that sentence that it's a condition of the approval that the plans be submitted prior to building certification, not approval, and then it goes on to read that draft conditions have been provided to the applicant and we are awaiting their feedback before finalising the decision, report and notice. So it doesn't say that they're actually waiting for the plans back. So if they get the okay from the applicant on the conditions, will they issue a report and decision and then the plans come in afterwards? I haven't got a particular issue with this development application. I'm probably coming at this more from a position of process.
I can't see how they would issue an approval without plans. They might not be as constructed plans, they would be more full construction plans. But, yeah, I'll have to follow that up, but there's no way that they could approve it without those plans.
I guess that's why I'm asking it is a procedural thing. I've got, as I say, I've got no particular issue at all with this development at all. But I would sooner our planners approve plans rather than approve a development with a condition that the plans be submitted before it's certified. I think maybe that's regular, it just seems irregular to me.
Well, we do help, Mr. Mayor, we try to help our developers, so we go out of our way to provide informal advice to help them get their application up to standard. So I think that's probably what that's referring to. Right, I've given informal advice saying, well, fix this up before we go any further.
And if that's the case, that's fine. But if we are, it reads differently. So if we can just clarify their term, what their explanation is there for us, that would be great. Councillors, other questions from the development report?
Mr. Mayor, just a quick query on the shipping container. Is there special rules and regulations around having shipping containers in town? We did discuss this a couple of years ago, didn't we?
There are. So we need to determine that through our planning scheme. So a shipping container is just like any other structure. It has to meet some sort of a standard. You can't just put a shipping container in your yard without getting a building approval.
I've just got a question on fees. Sorry, do we offer fee relief for not-for-profits? Just note the fees for Aramac Amateur Racing Club, $1,800 for their roof structure. Is that consistent?
It's case by case. So normally the clubs come to council and ask for fee relief.
And they haven't in this case?
Not that I'm aware of.
That it could possibly be covered by Queensland Racing, in which case I wouldn't want to give them fee relief. So,
It's fully funded, I believe, Mr. Mayor.
and that would include recoverable costs by council. Okay, very good. No problem at all. Councillor Plum, did that really answer your question on, did it satisfy your question there regarding shipping containers?
Yeah, and by the look of the name that's on it, I'm sure he's well aware of the rules and regulations of what it is about. But we did have that discussion a few years ago, didn't we, Mr. Mayor, about...
So when we first started our town planning process with, what we do with shipping containers and how to, yes, you're right. And, I must admit we didn't, we might just need to revisit where, I can't recall off the top of
that discussion.
No.
I can't recall off the top of my head where it is in our draft town plan. So can we just make a note to investigate what provisions have been made in our draft planning scheme for that? Because it definitely was raised and workshopped, so it would be included. It just wouldn't have been, it obviously wasn't flagged by the planners for any further discussion. So they must have been comfortable with the direction we gave on that.
I just haven't seen anything since. That's why I thought I'd question that as to...
So the decisions that we made at that time would not yet be in effect. So they would be operating under our existing, under the Blackpool Shire Council planning scheme, because the decisions we've made around implementing it in the new planning scheme still won't take effect for several months. Well, until the old three are abolished and the new ones incorporated.
Just as long as they're covered.
You're very correct that the applicant there should be very aware of what is required. Okay, no more questions on planning. Somebody ask Councillor Peoples to rejoin us, please. which is fine for him to come back in while we're discussing it. I did find it very beneficial for councillors that the planning team attended the January meeting. Not saying that other officers can't represent their report, but I do think periodically it would be good if the planners, maybe once or twice a year, or obviously we had some very, perhaps even the next meeting, if it is that meeting where we're receiving a decision report regarding to, say, mitigation, that the planners are here to directly, and I know that comes at a cost to council, we need to minimise unnecessary, but if it is critical stuff that requires technical advice, having them in the room, I think officers, councillors did all agree, it was very good to hear direct from the planners.
Yeah.
So whether it's in person or via the big screen, when we get to, this week there wasn't anything to discuss, but having those technical people on hand was well received. Can I have somebody move that we receive the workplace health and safety report? Councillor Arnold, second Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? 7-0. Questions?
No, we had 0 incidents for the month of January, so the statistics haven't changed from the previous month.
Well done, staff in general.
I will flag there are incidents for February.
Already. Oh well, not taking any of the gloss off their efforts in January. Very well done. Even if there were only 12 work days. 336, please. MPIs in this. Sorry.
COIs, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Either prescribed or declarable. Who has one? And Gary, Councillor Peters. You have some company this time. Oh, not if you go out different doors, you won't. Can I have somebody move the report, please? Councillor Hanson, second of Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried 5-0. Questions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a comment. Nice to see the colour coding and explanation at the top.
I was only hoping that you would deliver that, so well done, Councillor.
I would only ask that if we could do it also to the special operating costs. We don't have a variance column on that, like the reporting. So we have two slightly separate formats for reporting.
Yeah.
Special and, is that intentional, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. So because capital is generally a finite item, special maintenance or special operating may be an ongoing cost. So we can do a variance.
We can still flag if it's over or under budget, so that we can ask the question as to why maybe it's over budget.
Plus also through you, Mr. Mayor, like just the tally down the bottom, we have the budget. So the special operating budget is tallied, but not the actual costs. If we could replicate the same or similar, very similar format, it just makes it easier to look at either one.
So I was going to ask this question during your report, Jenny. Fence on the outskirts of town here. Any idea of scheduling yet for that?
Mr. Mayor, I've in discussions with the senior work supervisor. We were hoping to be able to use our own workforce to do it, to reduce costs. Going to bed down next week. The staff that can do it, because we have some obviously fencing contractor, people who've done fencing contract on staff, but they've been tied up with the rec park at the moment, so hopefully we might be able to interrupt that for a little bit and get that done, because I've asked that it be done before tourist season starts.
Hence my questioning as well. I'm very worried that we're not that far away from, I'll repeat that, sorry. I'm not worried at all that we're far away, but tourists are already travelling. I know our caravan park's starting to have visitors, so our unofficial caravan park's probably not far away from getting visitation as well.
Yeah.
And the building addition at the showgrounds for the new shed, it's an LRCIP program, 8,000.
To you, Mr Mayor, Council that's going to be no cost to Council on that one now. Funding was given to a community group who have reimbursed us for that cost that we'd outlaid for the purchase of that, and they're organising the installation. Councillor Plum will be able to update you on the progress of that.
Councillor Plum.
Yeah, so I've engaged a private carpenter to do that because the council carpenter is busy. So in the next few weeks.
Which organisation got the grant? Show Society, yeah, sorry, you're only advising us, there's no decision
Show
around.
Society got the grant for that division wall and to replace the light tower of RACQ funding.
Okay, and that's scheduled soon?
Yeah. Yeah, we're working on the tower at the moment. We've just got to try and get a crane here to put it up. And the material for the dividing wall is here, and we've just got to get the carpet off. We're supposed to have the grant acquitted by the end of February, but they've given me an extension.
So that funding allocation for LRCIP, that's obviously round one.
So then, Mr Mayor, there, that's what was in the budget, original budget.
Yep.
So I need to now, once we've decided on that new funding in the resolution, we'll change this to, update this to show.
My point really is though that is now not going to be required. What are we going to do with that $8,000 of LRCIP? If it was council money, it'd just go back in the bank, but it's a grant, so have we got an intention?
Well, Mr Mayor, it was notionally allocated to LRCIP.
Was
so
it?
It's a saving to council.
So it wasn't a submitted project to LRCIP?
Sorry. What we did was, because you can't put so remember LRCIP just put in
Projects, not
projects,
values.
not values, and also groups of projects. So there was, so the description would have been building improvements at the showgrounds and amenities. There was a whole series of projects bundled together.
So has there been an $8,000 overrun on some other project to absorb it, or is there going to be an $8,000 underspend and we need to find something else to apply it to?
Well, we won't know till all the projects are finished, so.
When's the completion date for round one?
30th of June.
And how are we tracking with the rest?
Well, we've got things, as you see in there, there's a PA system, which we're going to talk about later as well. There's
That's round two.
the watering system's done.
So I just look at the Marlborough Town fence overspend of 9,766 in the same program. So could I even just eat that up? Right.
So I'll have to present a separate report on how we're progressing in total towards those.
Okay, I think that'd be good because if there's is there scope if we're not going to spend it to submit another project so that we use up all of our round one funds? Because it was about 1.1 million, I think. No, sorry, not be 1.3. It was more than round two.
It was 1291. That was equivalent to the R2R amount for the year. So we still have to do the disability ramp. We know that's going to over that budget amount, so.
Have we received those prices yet?
Got a price for the Barkey one. I'm not sure about Aramac.
Mr. Mayor, no, because I know it's going to be way over the 20.
So we'll bring those things.
Yeah, so until we collate all the costs that we've expended against that program, we don't know what we haven't spent.
Okay,
We
so
also have in there the sewage treatment plant funding. We've got 500,000 there, so until we get tenders for that, there could be substantial changes in that price as well.
tenders for that are due, what, April? Sewage treatment, we think tenders by April.
Will then depend on resolutions today.
Right. If it's favourable. May?
I would guess that I would assume we'd be getting it done later.
So just in terms of green tracking, can we just perhaps, I don't know if next month's applicable given what I just heard, but maybe April or March, if we can have a look at LRCIP and what's acquitted, what's still to be acquitted, or what's completed, sorry, what's still to be completed, and if there's funding left, so that we can make sure that perhaps it's too difficult to introduce a new project at the late stage, but we may be able to vary an existing one to eat up the slack. We don't want to give any of that back. But I'd like council to have some oversight on where the extra funding is allocated, to what. Okay, that's my questions for now. Others?
Mr. Mayor, in the plant area, and it might just be a typo, we've got probably the bottom half of the page, a Prado, a 12-seater bus and a Prado, and the actual costs are 16,000, 33.5 and 31.5. Whereas we budgeted 65, 66 and 65. So is that just a typo in or is...
Can you direct me to the line item?
Plan item, well, it ends in 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, all right.
So Mr Mayor, that would be because of the trade, so we haven't processed the trade-ins. So that's the net, at this stage, that's the net cost to council.
But then some of the other ones we have processed the trade. Like the ones above it,
They may not have had a trade.
well, it's got trade, the first one, trade 6141, Mr Mayor, budget of 48 and we've spent 53.5 on a highlight single cab.
So in that case, it's, I'll have to check. But
So,
some would have trades processed, some will not.
would it be not the other way? The trade has been processed and the acquisition not, because it's favourable. It's 48,000, for example, for ending in 10 Toyota Prado GXL wagon manual 6204. It's $48,945 positive. So isn't that the reverse? That
We've not only spent an extra $5,500, Mr Mayor, but the trade-in hasn't been
It has,
applied.
so those ones would have been private sales or through. So some plant was sold privately, so it's not a trade, even though it says trade. That generic term for we're selling the vehicle, so
Yes, yes.
it doesn't mean we've traded it, it may mean that we've sold them privately. Whereas Yes, those ones that are, say, 65,000, we've only spent 16, well, that's after trade. So we have to add the trade back in. We have to process that transaction. You will add it back to the gross cost and the trade will go to sale of assets.
Mr Mayor, it just makes a lot of the reporting very confusing. Because
Oh,
we've got sell or trade, which our Deputy CEO has basically just said it's the same thing, so. And it makes the position, the financial position look, well, it makes me in particular question the figures that we've got in there and the level of confidence in it.
Well, it looks like it's $120,000 better than budget, but it's not really.
It may not be at this stage.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, and I think that exception reporting, like we need to put an asterisk or something there to say that, because we look at that and it just jumps out that something
Well,
doesn't add up.
so I think probably the best way to do it would be to, like, if it's coloured, it's completed. If it wasn't coloured, it's not complete. There's still transactional cost, you know,
Yes.
like there is for other items further on in the issue. Like if it still works in progress, it's not coloured anything because there's no final decision made. Whereas, so if there's still things, transactions still to occur for those three, if they weren't coloured, well, we would know, yeah, okay, the figure looks funny, but it's not relevant because it's not
Still
finished yet.
ongoing, Mr Mayor.
Jenny, you were about to say?
To you, Mr Mayor, I was just going to probably give you the perspective from the processing side of it as to why it looks like that. So when we do a trade, they take it off the invoice. So that is the net amount of the invoice paid after the trade. We can change the way we do that. Well, we don't need to change the way we do that. We can change the way we report that and go to the total price of the invoice, not the trade, not what we actually see in job costs. So I can talk to the finance officer. And it's a very simple fix. So it's purely how it's processed and what you see has actual cost in the job costing system. So simple, it is a simple fix. I'll work with the Deputy CEO and the Finance Officer and we'll, so yeah.
And Mr Mayor, it might be worth our next budget meeting just to have half an hour or an hour around these reports so that we can see what council can do to make it easier to give us the information.
So would that be the case? Yes. Would that be the case, Jenny, for all of the trade, sale, whatever, that hasn't been applied? Because it, like the only ones that are red here are new. Oh no, they're not.
To you, Mr Mayor, no, I would say in some of those cases, again, some of those might have been that ute wasn't, so they might have allowed for the after trade price of 48 in their budgeted cost, and the ute was sold elsewhere, so the trade wasn't included in the job cost. So I guess the ones you look at the 65, where there were trades, that's the total price. So that's maybe what you have to look at in the budget is what it's the true cost of the vehicle, and then you do the allowances based on whether someone privately tenders for it and wins that tender, or some of these were actually all sold at auction.
Yeah, so either way, so if we look at, for example, item that ends in 6148 1002 6, the GUD tipper truck 5114, we budgeted $200,000 for the replacement of that. The cost is 175, so it looks like we're 25 better than budget. Is that 175 after the trade was applied or before?
I am more familiar with that. The bargain one, but that's, it will be to do with the trade.
Sorry, Councillor.
Which vehicle are you looking at? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Which vehicle were you looking at then?
5114 Aramac tipper truck.
The very first green one.
Yeah.
Just says. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say.
To you, Mr Mayor, that is actually, the cost that actually is reported there is actually the committed cost only, so the actual cost isn't in there yet. So we haven't actually paid for it.
Right.
But looking at this purchase, at the purchase order, that is what would have been the tendered price, yeah. And there doesn't look to be any allowance for trade on there.
So the figure's actually better than that. Once you take the trade, so the tendered price is $25,000 less than we budgeted, and say we get $25,000 for the new old truck, which was using that figure. The variance is actually then going to come down to $50,000 better than budget. Is that right?
Looking at the purchase order, I don't know if we traded that truck.
The trucks we were selling privately.
Okay.
So I don't think that was traded.
However it's disposed of is irrelevant.
Yeah.
If we get $25,000 for that truck and the invoice is for $175,000 for the new one, our budget position will be $50,000 better off. Is that correct?
So it's very difficult to report because plant is, even if we just put the gross costs there, you're not going to see how we did against the trade. So that has to be another, like we allow, in the budget we allow for the purchase costs and we allow for the trade costs and the trade receipt. So if we put the gross cost, budget, gross cost that we paid for the vehicle, then it could be plus or minus, but then you don't know. We could have paid more for the new vehicle but got more for the trade as well to compensate. So really, we're either going to go with the net, what is the net budget and net cost?
Which is what I thought this sheet was, because I understand that you have to account for the two things separately from an accounting point of view. The purchase of a new one and the disposal of an old asset are, whilst linked, they're separate transactions. But in terms of the plant replacement of a truck that is budgeted at $200,000, if we can get that $25,000 cheaper than we budgeted and we get $25,000 for the new one, we've effectively replaced an asset for $50,000 less than we budgeted for. So from a simplistic point of view, if this report shows us the changeover price, because at the moment I'm not sure what it's showing us. Well, it's even, actually it's not even showing us actuals, it's showing committed costs. So that committed costs have bumped ahead for a while because so if we don't,
with plant, the committed cost is the quoted price.
right.
But yeah, so we can change it to changeover price, and that would simplify it, so you're not worried about whether it's before whether it's got the trade in it or not.
Well, it helps the ones that are red. If you've got a better trade, then in fact you might still be, well, I thought that was the point of the plus and the minuses in this, with overall some individual items might come in dearer than budget, but then there's some that come in better to help the whole thing out, whereas at the moment the green ones might not be green. Although if you apply the trade on top of that, they should get better.
We budgeted 50,000 for trading and it got 5,000, actually 25,000 for this sort.
Yep, true.
So I think you will have to go away and have it kind of report it back to me to really clear up.
Maybe it needs to come, maybe it doesn't fit in that report.
Because it seems to me, pull that out of this report altogether and just have it as a separate report, because it doesn't fit this format.
No. Councillor Gleeson.
I just wanted to, we were discussing vehicles and I just wanted to, I think we've all worked out that it's not quite right, because there's the vehicle number 0012, the trade-in value and the other value, yeah, it add up to exactly our $65,000 budget. I don't believe for 1 minute that that vehicle costs exactly $65,000. And the $31,468 for the trade-in, is that GST?
Well, there's not a trade-in listed there. What's there is the actual cost. So the trade-ins aren't in this sheet.
And which one's the actual cost?
Not the column that's highlighted, the first one.
The 31.
Correct. So that would have been The reason that adds up to exactly 65 is the second column is the variance between what we've actually spent and what we budgeted to spend, so it has to add up to 65. So that in that case, there's no way we replace the GXL wagon. That's the point I think you were making, Councillor Hens, to 31,000. So that must be after a trade supply. It has to be. So in that case, let's have a look at a different report at the next meeting. I'm talking myself in circles here. Because that tells a different story on that line to what the truck does that I highlighted earlier, where the trade's not yet applied. Or sale. I'm using trade generically. The disposal of the assets not applied. Right. Any further questions? Not relating to plan, because we can't answer them now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in general, like we're 2/3 of the way through the year, and the next month or two with public holidays, we've still got a lot of projects and money to expend.
$13 million to be precise.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Are we confident that that's going to get done? Especially, as you've already alluded to, especially some of that stuff that's under a greening arrangement that needs us to have it done or acquitted by June 30.
Yep, very good question. Someone got answers?
Mr. Mayor, the major projects are sewage treatment plant upgrade, which will go out to a tender, and so that will be, one fairly large project, a couple of $1 million, $2.5 million. Then you've got the SCADA and telemetry is funded by a loan, so it may get deferred because we don't have a reason to spend that by the 30th of June. I'm not sure what the timetable for that one is. Let me answer that. And we've got R2R money to spend. The majority of that will go on reseals. So there's a reseal program which we will distribute to you this afternoon after the meeting. So that's obviously reseals can be done in a very short time. So that will chew up the balance of that R2R funding.
The big one you jumped over there, Brett, was flood damage, which obviously is not time limited either. Well, it is, but not by 30 June, is it?
Other one, the Globe Tower. Well, we've got an extension to October, is it June? October to have that finished, so part of that funding will carry over to the next budget. But things like Muttaburrasaurus will be done. The Aramac pollution blocks.
When will Muttaburrasaurus be done?
Through Mr. Mayor, March 3rd is the latest date. And 18th of March completion date for the amenities in Thurrock.
Sorry, completion for the amenities at Aramac. But we don't have we just hear March, generically sometime in March for Muttaburrasaurus, because the community is extremely keen for answers. Well, for it to be done. I did explain to them yesterday that because of the borders shutting, the team have gone on to another project, but they were all very keen for an answer. So I'll be able to tell them March. Maybe April. Right. So generally speaking, Brett, you're saying that whilst there is still some big dollar items, a lot of it's in 5 or 6 key projects. Flood damage doesn't have a completion time. 2 of them can be deferred or carried over in case of the building our regions and the loan works for SCADA and telemetry, so that an overlap there isn't the end of the world. most of the other projects are on
The
schedule.
only, flood mitigation, we may not have to spend that money, depending on what council decides. And the Barkey waste landfill is probably the one that concerns me, is getting that finished on time.
So what's the hold up there?
Through you, Mr Mayor, is procuring all the different bits and pieces to make it operational. Also the tie-ins on the platform that was built for the refuse transfer stations and the roadworks to tie that. It's getting some focus at the moment.
Still possible for June?
Well, we have to, because it's works for Queensland, 30th of June funding. You may have seen the photo finish box at the Barkey Racecourse that's been funded by Racing Queensland. So, Jenny, they're updating that.
Yeah.
The photo finish box.
Yes. To you, Mr Mayor, yes, they were on site the other day. I can pass around what they anticipate.
Can we just on, perhaps on this one, but definitely on the building our regions one for the review. So this is what they're going to provide, or that's not our rush track,
No, it's fully on.
very ground. So is this exactly the same that they're providing us?
I believe so.
So could we perhaps, have we got some artist impressions, some architectural drawings of the lookout at the flow?
Thank you.
No, I haven't had any updates from the architects since their last meeting here.
We can, because it's gone out to tender, so all the tenderers obviously have the drawings.
Could we put them in the wall of somewhere, but I'm thinking where it would be up to your officers, but a good spot would be actually at the Globe somewhere,
At the Globe on the Mass Work.
just so people can see what is happening in that space. And perhaps even on our website, if we could have a bit of a look at down the track, maybe on either Invest Barcaldine or on our own Council Barcaldine website, the entirety of the report from the master precinct plan that they developed for their auditorium, library, the whole works. It's not necessarily council's received that report, we haven't actioned other elements of it, but we certainly did that stage that's happening now. But if we can just put up there what it is that architects have proposed for that area so that people can see that if they are of such a mind.
Mr Mayor, probably at the news agency, those boards would be good too, at the news agency.
At a variety of notable, yeah. I'll let officers determine, but it would be good for people to see what's being planned for construction. Councillor, please.
Mr Mayor, while we're talking about this progress report, there's an item there, the Barcaldine Pool Disability Access, $31,000. Should that sort of thing keep going ahead now that we're proposing to reconstruct the whole area?
Well, we aren't proposing to reconstruct the 50-metre pool.
Is that disability access, is that into the large 50-metre pool, or is it just an access into the toilet, or?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it is a platform lift for wheelchair access into the pool, the 50-metre pool.
Now, you raise a good point though, I mean, just enlighten me, is it funded?
Work for you,
Okay, so realistically, council is between the devil and the deep blue sea there, because if the new concept is funded, disability access primarily will be in our new facility, or the intent around that would be. However, because this is funded, and the other one's not yet funded, if we don't get the funding for the new concept and we reallocate this to another job, then we don't have disability access at all. So I understand the question, and if we knew we were getting the new facility, you're going to tell me we can't move it even if we want to.
Already ordered it. It's
We'll stop that
on a
conversation.
ship
Councillor,
between
please.
Europe and here.
Right. But your point's valid. I mean, if we had a degree of certainty that we were going to get the other pool and it was applicable, we could also put it there, but we don't know that, and we possibly won't know that before the end of June. So, in the interest of ensuring we do have suitable disability access for the pool, I think we have to proceed with this, and if we're fortunate and we get the other grant application up, well, I guess we're going to have disabled access to both the pools. I see the point. I don't think it's bad planning. I think we'd just be a victim of the success of our grant if we got that.
Mr. Mayor, hopefully the lift is removable and we can use it somewhere else. If it's a bolt-on type.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
So there could be savings whether it's used at another pool at another location or perhaps at our new facility to heat up overruns.
Thank you.
Notwithstanding the point that Councillor Arthur made, there's still a bit to be done. I'm actually broadly thinking we're tracking okay, given there's a few big ticket items there. I think council staff have been progressing a lot of these projects very, very good, so hopefully that can continue. Probably the only thing that would be subject to inclement weather delaying significantly would be reseals. You know, if we had an inordinate wet, extended period of wet, but I mean, that's still not going to slow it to the same point it would if it was rehab where you're dealing with dirt.
Yes, Mr. Dean, shift to the next week.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions? I invite the councillors that are outside back inside, please. Attendants for the Globe will be back shortly, will they?
Just
Meadow close next
Friday,
Friday, 26th.
Evaluation will take a while, so probably we'll decision in March or April.
Well, the meeting probably, they get 3 weeks, should be, yeah.
Who's evaluating them?
I don't think.
Yep. MPD.
Then I recommend council. Yeah.
Right.
So it should be for the March meeting.
I'm just thinking October's not that far away. There's
We're going to get started.
$1.5 million worth of work to happen. Well, we have started. Fencing's been installed. It's correct.
Sorry, we have started.
337, can I have someone move the economic development report, please? Councillor Arthur, Councillor Plum, seconds. Those in favour? In favour, Councillor Peebles?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
7-0. Just probably my first couple of comments here. So I've asked about the observation tower, if we can make that, it does contribute to economic development, make those plans public. The other one was, and it's outlined in our report here, the Barkle or the Barkey Aquatic Centre. What we end up submitting as our, once council have endorsed it, which we haven't yet, but those plans that you referred to from, who was doing it? Novum. Would we be able to also make that, even if it's just on our website and maybe in the notice board outside the pool or something, what we're planning there? We've consulted quite broadly with the public about it, but over quite a number of meetings now over a protracted period of time, so I think we've consulted, but if we can just provide them an idea of what it is that we are submitting, at least for stage one. And the truck stop development. Is this current
No
report?
further. Yep. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So the new player showing interest in the site as opposed to the old player?
So the original player or developer who withdrew, and then someone else showed interest.
So that they've since gone cold.
No, I think they're still considering it. Given I think we're at the situation now where really these truck stops or fuel stops are really need to be redesigned because we won't have diesel and petrol. They need to, phase in hydrogen or electrical charges. And how are they? You're going to make an investment, millions of dollars into a facility. You want a 20 or 30 year life out of it. So I think they'd be very wary about investing unless they're going to look at it being phased in, multi. I don't know what the terminology is, but the fuel source will have to be able to change.
I think you raised an interesting point there, and I think it probably deals with, and I'm intentionally asked these questions in open meeting. I think given that 20 to 30 years is a long time, and that there is the capacity to, notwithstanding what I said 2 hours ago, that we need to be thinking in that space. There's still heavy haulage in Australia is still going to be heavily reliant on dieseline for the life that you've just outlined. But there are existing businesses in Buckgordon that may be affected by development of this nature. Council is an enabler. We don't. But we're also, I'm not going to say no or yes, but I think it's important that those elements that are not commercial in confidence, and especially anything that council does to facilitate development in this space, is public. So, if people approach us and want to maintain confidentiality about what their intentions are, that's fine. But if there's the need for council to facilitate, as has happened with the original development, the relocation of sporting organisations potentially and availability of land and so forth, I think it's very important that the public's aware of that, so that it's not only the people who are choosing to make the investment, but it's people who have already invested in our region and not kept in the dark when council is facilitating or undertaking activities on behalf of potential developers in that space. So, any more comments on that? Brett, sorry.
So, Mr. Mayor, I suppose the related party to that is the gun club. So they'll come to council to ask what their future is. Like, do they invest more in that site, or are we going to move them to the new site? How is that going to be facilitated?
I know you didn't mean this as you just said it, we wouldn't be moving them anywhere. The developer would be acquiring their land and undertaking their removal and relocation costs. Is that correct? Or has there been discussions about council?
No, but I think they were, I think there was an expectation that they thought council was going to facilitate that. So that's, I have to make it clear that's not the case. It would be the developer pays them to move.
So conversations are still ongoing with the gun club about that?
No.
I'll just hold. Councillor Plummer, we're only talking information here. Are you comfortable staying in the room while we're discussing this?
Yeah, I'm not on the executive committee.
Oh, right. Sorry, my apologies. Sorry, I thought you were on the
That's not
executive.
the rifle club, this is the play target club.
Oh, yeah, and I thought that was which you were on. That's the
I'm
other
on
one.
the executive committee now.
Yeah, so I suppose they want a response from council about where are we going. What's their tenure on that land?
What is their tenure on that land?
At the moment, none, because we acquired the land. So it's council freeholded it.
The land where they're currently operating.
So we acquired it in anticipation of selling it to the developer.
acquired it from,
The state.
which was being held as a sporting reserve. What was its classification?
It was a reserve, it was a trust, it was a lease, it was a term lease that the gun club had with the state. So they relinquished their lease to us. They acquired the land
And converted it
to freehold.
at cost.
130,000. And native title had been extinguished, so we didn't have to go through a native title process.
And the cost involved in the development of their potential relocation site. We transpired there, we already owned the freehold, did we not?
We've got, yeah, we own the freehold.
We just changed access, is that correct?
Well, we've agreed to, we haven't done any work there. So we haven't spent any money out there. But we have, so the offer was that if we sold the land, the developer would have to pay whatever it costs them to move from the old site to the new site, which is about 700,000 or 800,000.
So the current state is we own the gun club.
Yes.
We don't have a developer. We're not contracted to any individual to buy the land off us. The gun club are operating out of their existing location, and they're now concerned about whether they continue to invest in infrastructure at that location, given the fact that they could be moved on pretty well at any time. Not a decision today, councillors, but we just need to be very mindful of. I am the last person in the world to be anti-development, but it does come when it comes at an impact, we need to be aware of that. And it's very pleasing that the gun club are continuing to have conversations with us. And I can appreciate the difficult situation. It's a chicken and egg scenario. You can't get developers without land, but when you acquire the land and the developer doesn't buy it, then effectively we've placed a not-for-profit in I would say difficult position, but a tricky position moving forward. So, any other questions on the economic development report? Well, all I can say on that is, can we just have a watching brief on that then for us, so that if there's a change, we know now the status quo. If any meetings indicate a change in that, either that the whole thing goes cold, or we may look at giving some certainty to the gun club via a lease from us to them, or putting in $1 million grant to move them to their new location. Someone wants to give them $1 million, we can help facilitate that. Then we free their existing site for in perpetuity.
They did apply for funding under the federal government sports grants. Missed out on that one. No, that was just to move the whole show to the new site. Just a reminder that Ring Park meeting is this afternoon, 5:30. The users meeting. Do any councillors want to attend that?
Councillor Gleeson.
The question, Mr Mayor, economic development, and we just mentioned that the rec park users, Council, possibly taken, Councillor Arthur and I were talking about this a while ago. The rec park has got a users group. Do you think that we should try and push out to council, try and push for community groups to have more of these? The rec park's got a group out there, so but the town common is going, there's people who've got cattle, there's going to be drones flying around there, there's going to be motorbikes running around there, there's botanical garden people walking around there. Should there be some more of these groups? So over at the showgrounds, we've got lots of different organisations there. Should we try and promote more of these these groups so that there can be a spokesperson, there can be group meetings and a spokesperson can come back with their ideas back to the council.
The Rec Park Users Group is effectively the Campcraft Association for the Rec Park. So that will be, it won't represent numerous groups. I don't think it's going to be like a users group to put.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're talking about having like a showground users meeting.
Showground users group and a common, yeah, there's lots of overlapping, especially out here in the town common shortly. There's going to be a lot of overlapping there with motorbikes and cattle and horses and walkers and all that sort of stuff, all in that area. I just thought it'd be an idea to sort of, for the council to put maybe the users groups in different areas.
I think it's a good idea where it can be facilitated positively, where there's going to be antagonism, is not quite the right phrase, but where there's going to be people who believe that the two groups are mutually exclusive and it shouldn't happen. It's going to be difficult to get a volunteers users group to represent that. I think that probably fits as the role of council to facilitate that, either officers or elected members. But definitely for facilities such as the rec park and the showgrounds, definitely think where you can pull all the groups together to try and map out what's needed and what the future of each facility's infrastructure requirements are. I think that's very beneficial. Interaction between Town Common, Botanical Park and Botanical Gardens and the motorbikes and yes, the drones. I personally think that should be facilitated by council. I think that's going to be, there will be some very contentious issues to arise from the development of any one of those four. So,
And on that, Mr. Mayor, the Botanical Park organisation has become incorporated, so it's now an official body, called the Maryland Botanic Park. I think it's called incorporated. So now they're incorporated, they will no doubt be coming to council for assistance.
yeah. Question, Councillor, please. Sorry. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just with emerging projects, I think I might have raised this before, but we got funding for some sort of planning for this bike trail.
Yes.
Didn't we discuss this going on this list too? You could say it's emerging, I don't know how far it's going to go, but it's just... And the other one I'd raise there, Mr. Mayor, is the preliminary discussions we had with Professor Dyer around a pilot project.
We probably need a bit more of a formal sort of scope there before I'd say you put it on this list. We need to he needs to get commitment from his university and we need to probably work that one up a bit more before I'd say it'd appear on a formal report.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, what bike trail were you talking about, Gary? The Aunt Emma bike trail?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we've already received funding for that, haven't we?
Right.
Yes.
Do some sort of feasibility study or something.
That's in progress.
Yeah, so. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
So, Mr. Mayor, yesterday I met with Sue McCosker from State Development and it's come out of the rapid meeting, we have to do that prospectus, so we're working on that, and that would, so each of the rapid councils is developing a investment prospectus. It's about sort of what have you got, what are you working on at the moment, and what's your future projects that you're looking to do. So I can see that once we get that up, that can be a live document and replace
And
this.
replace that.
Yeah. It's just a bit of work involved in getting that together.
Sue wants those reports so that when she has her meetings, she can push the projects, you know, to when the government's designing grant funding programs, they need an idea of what it is that people want funded. And if Sue's got an idea of the style of things that we've got on our radar, for example, the RSL amphitheatre type, bad example, but something like that, or Oak Street Park, you know, what do we do with that? Like those sort of conceptual ideas that we haven't actually got funded yet, it might not easily fit within existing funding streams. They'll use reports like they've asked us to put together to design future funding rounds and identify how we, you know, might be able to get that money in the future.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know how we, I would just like to see a couple of other projects there from our smaller communities too. And, you know, I know it's been brought about in the past, talked about in the past with regards to maybe RMA being put on a rail track around the community. Well, that's something we'd like to do, but it's, you know, it's, but where do you draw the line, what's emerging and what gets on this list?
And that's, but they do want sort of futuristic projects. What may happen in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slightly different document to this, but it's probably the more relevant document for a strategic focus is the one that is, you know, we get an update of things we're already working on, but more importantly, what's the future look like in terms of economic development for our region? And we've just talked about community council-owned facilities, but this report will also obviously have things like the Waratah Power Station, the renewable energy hub, because that's economic development as well. It's just private economic development, but it's all things that local government are going to have to facilitate in some way. So, so it's not just inwardly thinking, it's what's the economic development strategy for our region generally. You know, what is it that we can advocate on behalf of people who are trying to generate economic development in our region? Gas would be another one. We're already undertaking exploration in our region. How do we facilitate gas? I mean, that's a challenge for local government. Anywhere that there's a gas field, local government has a problem with. At some way and in some level there's an issue. So, you know, they're challenging things that if they're part of our key economic development strategies moving forward, well, it shows government that that's what's on our radar.
Yeah.
Any more questions for the economic development report? 338. We've had mention of this before, but they now have a formal request, Brett. Written there.
Mr. Mayor, I've probably only spoken to you about it. I don't know if other councillors are aware, but
was mentioned at our first budget workshop.
So Barcombe Aged Care are sealing their car park. They've done all the foundation work, and they've got the bitumen and screenings donated, but they need supervision and plan to be able to do the seal, and they're asking the council to provide that in kind.
Questions?
Mr. Mayor, any sort of rough cost to us, Brett or Rick?
I've put 10,000 there. It's only going to be until they look at it. I'm not sure what, you know, you'd need to check the quality of the foundations, what they've done there. We could have more idea.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just put up to 10,000. I couldn't see it costing any more than that.
Up to 10,000? I'll move that, Mr. Mayor, up to 10,000.
Just any other questions first before we go to that? So you'll move that. Seconded, Councillor Lachlan.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, I'm going to go to debate in a minute. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clarify. We've got to move it a seconder. Now, yes, speakers to the resolution or against it?
Because there will be a cost to council, because if they're going to do it Monday to Friday or Saturday to Sunday, we're paying wages and loss of access to the plant, and it's not a big job, but it's still going to take cockerel spreaders and that out of the cycle for half a day.
Is that where you've derived your 10,000 days items? Is that?
So that's Brad's figures of 10,000.
That's the style of thing you were thinking on to make that?
Yeah, because, it's only, well, presumably it would be,
3 years.
So it'd be less than a day's
There'd be a
work.
couple of trucks, probably a broom, a couple of guys on the ground, a couple of truck drivers, a supervisor. Probably half that.
No, it's only the, not 3 year Mr. Mayor, it's only the car park and the aged care.
It's better.
It's not a large area, but it's fiddly work.
It's fiddly,
It's a lot of hand barring, it's not just straight reseal 8 metres wide, boom, boom, boom. It's,
The job they'll probably go like that for when they're told. Any more comments? Sorry. So
I'm all for it as long as we can do it Monday to Friday and it doesn't affect our program too much.
Yeah, that's the other problem.
And ideally in conjunction with some other work that we've already got, the cockles and that on, and the guys are getting the frame to do seal work.
other comments? Put it to the vote. Those in favour? 7-0. Appointment of internal auditor. The report here is very clear, detailed. Anyone need any more support information than what's provided? Does anyone have a problem with the resolution?
Just some questions, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
So we normally have a rolling 3-year contract?
It's moved. Peter O'Regan, this was his first 3-year contract. It's ended. The prior internal auditor was Bill Ringrose. Bill asked not to be reconsidered. He just had too much work on. At the time, he was providing a lot of the secretariat prep for the the drought relief, the drought relief appeal, and he has a number of other audit roles. Peter's experience in local government and regional Queensland is substantial, but his time to be able to quit this has been limited, and so.
And generally, their auditors, it's standard practice to rotate auditors. So you get fresh faces in.
Mr. Mayor, one other thing, it's just got budget and resource implications nil. We're paying for the service. Is it more or less or the same as what we paid previously?
It will be within budget and the same, yes.
So the same as what we budgeted.
Yeah, so there's no impact on the budget. Because we've already budgeted that cost. It's within the budget.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, through you, Direct. It looks like that they have a lot on their plate. They do a lot, and possibly they're very good. Do you think they're going to stick to the timelines, and have scratch? Like, by the look of that report, they're very busy.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that was a concern, but they have committed that they will do that 120 hours before 30th of June.
No, that's all right. It was just going through the report. I just thought that maybe might be a concern with their timelines.
I guess part of the role of the audit committee is to ensure that they're on track. Just they've set themselves a target, and the audit committee's meetings need to ensure that they're on schedule and on track, and keep them on track, I guess. Yeah. Councillor Peoples, Councillor Plum, you're the chair. Are you happy to move that?
Yes.
Councillor Peoples, second. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Officers have recommended the appointment of Greg Evans as a member of our audit committee. We do require some members due to the recent retirement of one of our members, so Greg's experience in finance and corporate finance, and local government finance speaks for itself. We've worked with him. Has anyone got a problem with this?
I haven't got a problem, but Greg was here as our acting deputy CEO.
Correct. So the deputy CEO is actually a member of the audit committee anyway.
Which we don't require anymore. So what's Greg's role going to be and for how long?
As a member of the audit committee?
Yeah.
Oh, you just attend audit committee meetings and provide advice?
Zoom
Zoom.
So he doesn't have to live here or be part of our
No.
operation. He's just an outside.
Yeah, we're
Independent.
only required to have 2 meetings a year. We generally have 3 or 4, so it goes for about an hour. That's it, he would just zoom in for the meeting.
I think having people
Plus-
of his skill set, given that we've had some pretty strong statements with auditors, having him there allows some rigour to reinforce the council appointees and the staff having that independent advisor, that independent, he's an actual voting member of the committee if we're formally moved with this.
I'm fine with Greg being there, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, he doesn't need to be a member of staff or present in our room, or he may choose to attend the meeting in Barcaldine, but the auditors seldom ever do. They're always on the phone, or nowadays they Zoom, so he'd be just acting like a... But he wouldn't be an ex officio member, he would be a member of the committee. So the same as Councillors Plum and Rogers and Brett, are you back on there now? And you're the only other member, so he makes the 4th member of the committee.
No, I sort of was reading that he was part of our operation and was going to be, so
No.
no, it's cleared that up. I'm
No,
fine.
he becomes now an external member.
Okay.
Councillor Gleeson?
He will be subsidised, financially subsidised.
For his time.
For his time.
But as I said, it's, if you have 4 meetings a year, go for an hour, do some preparation
I mean,
so
I'm in favour of the mayor, not just, it will be at a cost.
maybe 10 to 12 hours, unless we ask, unless there's something really complicated.
The role of the committee is not to undertake the technical work, it's to review the reports that are presented to them, the briefing notes around depreciation schedules and risk schedules, and so they review that and adopt them, or recommend them for adoption by us in some case. If there's a technical, their job is to review it, and with apply their skill set. If there's an issue, they send it away to somebody else to work on. They don't have to then go and develop the draft briefing note or rework a depreciation schedule. It's simply providing a level of review of governance issues around finance. So his meeting prep is not presenting a paper, it's reading the papers to be adopted.
A bit like council meeting. The members get the agenda and you make the decisions based on the recommendations in the papers.
Without the need to consult, the audit committee doesn't need to consult anybody like we do.
Thank you.
Councillor Plum?
I'd like to move that we,
Thank you. Councillor Peoples, you'll second that. Anyone wish to speak against? Being none, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? 7-0. Councillors, you'll note your briefing papers for this includes notional allocations. I just remind you that we don't actually submit projects on a per cost basis, and given that some or most of these are still yet to go to tender, I ask your indulgence that we remove from the resolution the figures that we've notionally allocated for each of these in terms of ensuring our tender process is not compromised. So I'm happy to delete the $X, please. No, sorry, so that still is correct, $936,002, because that's what we've received, but we can delete the figures next to each item. Is everyone happy with that? I just don't want to flag with people because, as we've said in numerous meetings now, these figures can move. We're allocated this much, we submit these jobs for it, and if money has to move from one to the other, that's within the scope of the program. The government is, once they authorise those projects to be funded under that scheme, we have $936,002 to spend. So, okay, now I'm happy to discuss the projects if there's any discussion further on that. These are the projects that are identified in our budget workshop, and for clarity, that needs submission by when, Brett? Next couple of weeks?
Yes.
And work will commence, can commence on these immediately? Like, I mean, once they're approved, I'm sorry.
No, we can actually retrospectively spend on them.
We would want to know that they're going to approve them though,
Yes,
before we
yeah.
start spending any money.
That's right, but yeah, the program is open from the 1st of January. And
So, also, I'm aware councillors look at this and think about, you know, a little bit more detailed information. And this is not approval for example, the Acacia Street bore upgrade. This is to seek security of funding. Obviously, that is a substantial project and will require full tender and possibly 2 tenders. Rick is the thinking at the moment, a tender for the drilling and a tender for connection. So it's at that point that we will receive the detailed information we require to make a decision around it. We're not just saying to somebody, here's a figure, go and spend it on a new bore. Some of the smaller items, for example, the Oak Street footpath is actually confirming, as Brett said, a project that we've already got underway. We proceeded on the basis that we would secure the funding from this project for that. The variation for the construction of the amenities building at the Barkford Recreation Deck also is fully costed, and that information is available. And I guess if we could just have a brief upgrade, we could just outline briefly the 2 showground upgrades. So the sound system, Jenny, just what council will receive from what benefit there will be to our facility as a result of this project.
To you, Mr. Mayor, so the sound system currently only does the oval showground area, and it was damaged in a storm, the storm that went through there back in February 2018, and there were some wires cut, speakers cut, birds chew the speaker wires often. A lot of this will go underground, but we have lots of complaints about when you're in the grandstand, it's either you can't hear it or it's so distorted, it's just not legible to the ears. So we've had lots of complaints about that over years. So it was looking at the upgrade of that, which is what we had budgeted for in this financial year. Then a community group went to look for funding because the Camp Draft obviously were looking for a sound system for when they have their events, and that was adequate. So again, the community group was hoping to get funding for it. So they had gone through and spoken to Macrosphere, who is a company who has done all the sound over there in the past. And so they were given a cost for that as well. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful, and Macrosphere spoke to us about it's cheaper to do it when you hear all at once. So that was when we looked at, they gave us a price to do both systems at the one time, and they would be compatible systems, and that means if there was an issue with the one at the showground, you've got the equipment at the Camp Draft that you can take across there. So that was the idea behind it.
So it's effectively an inbuilt redundancy in the system.
Yeah, so it's really just upgrading to the newest technology that hopefully should overcome a lot of the issues that we have there. So some of the cabling is underground, that's been cut by different things, that when people drive spikes in some of the areas, so there's been...
And so if you had concurrent events, for example, there was an event using the Camp Draft facility and an event using the showgrounds, like a game of football, you could effectively have 2 zoned PA systems, one looking after one area and one right into the other area.
Yeah, they're totally separate systems, so but compatible in the fact that if there is something goes wrong, rather than having to wait for Macrosphere to either come out or talk someone through fixing of it, you can actually go and get the equipment.
And even though they're separate systems, is there the capacity to bridge them? So, for example, at an event such as West Tech that maybe you know, there's a master of ceremonies and wants to be heard in all areas, is there the capacity to bridge them so that the one microphone could address every area of the showgrounds?
I could ask them that, but I would think you'd nearly be able to because they're compatible systems. So yeah, I can check that out.
Would councillors agree that would be beneficial?
Yes, Mr Mayor. And does that extend to the racecourse and the sheep pavilion area? Again, Mr Mayor, for those larger events, if we've got exhibitors for whatever it is.
Utilise.
Yeah, or ideally you have one system that can connect to all the different satellites, but then you can also say Camp Draft Radio Arena can operate. We could have 3 functions and they could have independent PA, or if we have a large function, we can have combined PA.
There, the racecourse has got a separate system at the moment. So you'd have to extend that quote if you're going to make that compatible as well.
What about the sheep pavilion? Is that going to be covered by this one?
No,
there's
never
no
has been, no. I don't think we've ever had one in there.
I don't know how you go with sound in there with echoing.
What about in the vicinity of it?
So we've had some functions in there, haven't we? That's the Crouchy plot, is that the sheep pavilion? We've had functions in there in the past.
We can look at that.
Okay. I'm not looking to greatly increase the scope here, but I'm with Councillor Arthur. If we're going to do this once, let's do it properly. So if there is something, and maybe if there's a technical link that can be made to work with the existing racecourse system and make this link, you know, so that you can, well, you know, I don't know, a Wi-Fi link or a Bluetooth or something.
Or through you, Mr Mayor, a staged approach so that we can add that area. Because West Tech, ideally, if we've got full exhibitors, it takes up the whole showgrounds area.
That's right. Yeah, so that's an interesting point. So maybe it may not form part of this initial scope, but if the developer's aware or the installers aware that we would like to have the capacity to link the 2 systems at some point in the future, we can do it out of a special operating bucket maybe.
And Mr Mayor, if we're putting in a new photo finish tower, it's probably a good opportunity to put speakers on that to broadcast out.
Okay,
I
well,
think
I think we can leave that. We've had a discussion. We can leave that with officers too. I think the point we're trying to make here is we want, if we're going to do this, let's have complete uniformity whilst also having sectionalised ability. So you can technically have a race day, a barrel race, and a game of football all occurring at the same time. I hope for the sake of the poor few volunteers this town's got that doesn't happen. But if it actually does happen, you could theoretically be using 3 separate systems, and I can guarantee you there'll be problems, but only with how loud one is as in relation to the other one, I guess. So, and yes, using what infrastructure we've got at the racecourse to its best ability, that would be very good. Councillor Bleeth.
Through Mr Mayor, the eastern side of that, where would that be housed? In the campground building or the second, you know, some part of it be housed in the secretary's box at the show at the main oval. There would be equipment housed on the other side, you would think?
Yeah, the second lot of equipment is, through you, Mr Mayor, the second lot of equipment is for the camp draft area itself. And I guess we would have to that would have to be worked to be put in a facility that all users of the facility have access to. So if the camp draft only have access to one of the buildings, it'll have to go in the building that everyone has access to, because it'll have to be accessible to all users.
Would there be a building there that's not accessible to all users? Around the Camp Draft ground?
It's not accessible.
Is there a building that Camp Draft had exclusive access to? Which one's that?
Secretary was.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You need to protect your equipment, and the race club's very good at making sure the system over there is locked away. No one gets access to it. It's looked after. Whereas the one at the showgrounds, anyone can go in there. They fiddle with the controls, So it's, every time someone goes to use it, you get a phone call saying the sound system doesn't work. The last person who's used it has done something. So you really do, you're stuck between You do want access to everyone, but you need to control it so that it is protected.
So the showgrounds in Alpha has probably got the most integrated sound system in the world, but no one can change anything at the back of it. It's locked in a box where they can change the master volume, and that's about it. Turn it on, turn it off. That's all. Like, you can't go and take a plug out of the back and plug it in somewhere else, because it used to have that access, and it's exactly what you said, wasn't it, Damien? We were constantly. And it's located in the Secretary's office because every user that uses the showgrounds has access to that building. So, all right, we've discussed those two, that one. Just briefly, I know we've discussed offline Aramat showground upgrade. Or effectively what we're flagging here is an extension. It's styled showground upgrade, but we're actually looking at a duplication of the caravan park that's located at the showgrounds. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I've had the electrician submit a request to Ergon Energy for them to come out and have a look at the power there to see how much power we've got.
So sorry, just before we get into the specifics, but the scope of the project here is we want to increase the amount of caravan parking space. That's right. Yeah. And so power is an issue. An existing fence is an issue. And outside that fence, once it's removed to the west, we need to develop more hard standing and run underground utilities such as power and water. Right, so that's the scope there. And I think we're familiar with the other three. So, anyone want to change anything, take anything out? Can I have somebody move that then, please? Councillor Rogers, second, Councillor Plum. Anyone want to speak against? Those in favour? 7-0. No, some answers for this, Brett?
I didn't ask him, Mr. Mayor.
That's fine. Can I have somebody move that we receive the report? Sorry, I'm miles away. Thanks, Councillor Plum. Second, Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried. Okay. Questions?
Mr. Mayor, the only thing that a significant change is that we have issued substantial invoices to TMR since this report was prepared. So actually debtors at the moment are $4 million. So we're owing $4 million claims that we've submitted since this report was prepared.
We are owed.
Just note there was an increase in flood damage, around 2.4 million December to January. Did we receive another advance payment? Or was it just an accounting pickup? Thank you, Brett.
I follow.
Mr. Mayor, our next advance payment will be when the 21 event is sorted out, which is likely generally takes 6 to 12 months. So we're expecting around September, somewhere around there.
Mr. Mayor, through you, one comment. I do like the variation comments that have been added into it, just to give a little bit more perspective on some of the wobbles, shall we say, in some of the figures.
Yep.
Probably also saves a bit of meeting time with some of us asking question after question.
I think people probably wonder about it because we get to the finance report these days and the details that everyone who's read it, it's sort of self, and it is getting better, you're right,
yes.
But it's pretty self-explanatory, and of course we've had 3 budget meetings already, so councillors are pretty well right across, and we also pull out that project progress report and deal with it as a separate item, so our actually receiving the finance statement, it doesn't really lend itself to significant questions because councillors are keeping themselves pretty abreast and the level of reporting is improving monthly.
And a lot of the questions, Mr Mayor, for percentage of spends on a project, like as you said, are dealt with previously in the project reports.
I just look, some questions, I was waiting for you guys, but I do have just an observation about rural road maintenance expenditure being 37% of budget. I know ordinarily, Rick, our biggest spend would be in the period from January to June most years, but are we expecting this year that a combination of emergent flood damage as a result of the weather we've already had, plus scheduled flood damage on a lot of these roads, that we probably won't expend our budget in that area?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
So is the 37% we've already spent roughly on track with what we'll spend in the next 5 months as well, another 37%, or will we be a little bit higher?
Will be substantially under, Mr Mayor. Whether it works out to about that or not, wouldn't be able to say, because we do other works while we're doing the flood damage as well, in between, brush up the road. But I'd expect it to be well below 100%.
Councillors, I highlight that because if we are still maintaining our service levels for our roads, it's a major saving of cash to council.
Yeah, 50-60% sounds good, as long as we're providing.
Even if it's 20%, 20% of 2.2 million is a substantial figure to be returning.
Yeah.
Or not spending, I should say. That's the real benefit of flood damage, apart from the employment aspect of it. It's directly linked, because instead of our wages and our plant being costed to fix a rural road, we're undertaking emergent repairs and capital repairs at somebody else's expense. So that's the real benefit. It's not this upgrade perception that people have, it's that we're just maintaining their road effectively and returning to the condition it was in with somebody else's money. All right, further questions on finance? There being none. 351, the works report. Goal 4 is the one I believe I have a question. Was it 3, was it? Sorry. Goal 3. I wrote goal 4 down, my apologies.
That's me.
Sorry?
That's me.
One's for.
So we just hold our questions on goals 3 and 4, please, for if there is any. Can I have someone move first that we receive the report? Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Gleeson. All in favour? 7-0. Rick, have you got anything you'd like to lead us through here? I know you've got a number of separate resolutions to follow.
Mr Mayor, just a couple of things. I suppose due to the wet weather, the gravel cartage on Park Yarramac was delayed. Was due to finish in January, now due to finish in February. You'll notice there's a new project in there, which is TMR Clermont Alpha Missing Link, which has been running an off-again project that I've been negotiating with TMR over the last few months. So it's actually underway now. So we're doing that project prior to going back to the Clermont Alpha project, which is the one we started before Christmas and sealed 1.5K.
That's a 2 kilometre link, is that correct?
It is, Mr Mayor, yes. And the other thing to note is we've got 2 crews going on the Park Yarramac Road now. One doing the first round of the federal government safety stimulus package works, which is the job Bark Hall crew are doing, and the other works is the program works that we had on before Christmas, which is the job the Yarramac crew are doing. In future, both of those crews will stay there for another job each. There's a widening job, which the Yarramac crew will do, which is up towards the other end, towards Yarramac, links up to the Orphicombe Road, and Bark will go on to the next rehab job as well. That'll take them both through to at least Christmas.
Very good. If anyone wonders what this council's doing at the moment, I just asked them to go for a drive from Barkpool and Yarramac. 2/3 of our fleet just about on that road. There's going to be a lot of it under detour very shortly. So both of those jobs are under full detour, is that correct?
Yes, Mr Mayor, and we've negotiated to seal the detour. So when we did that project last year, we had issues, 5 on the rain, we were closing the road. So we negotiated with TMO to seal those details.
So he's just now effectively said it's not going to rain for the next 4 months for you, Councillor Gleeson, is what he's saying.
It's good, I just want to be.
All right, questions for goals 1 or 2, please? Are there questions for goal 3? Goal 4? Goal 5? Councillors don't need to leave the room. Resolution 352. Oh, agenda item 352. Or did you have a question before I go? This is your...
Yes, no. Just slow scrolling through.
Okay, we'll deal with all of these one at a time due to some MPIs and some prescribed and some not conflict of interest. So, anything to add to what you've reported here, Rick?
Mr Mayor, the issue with this, I suppose this run of tender exceptions that I'm putting forward is the project that we're doing on one of the projects we're doing on the Barkwell-Narramac Road is a federal government stimulus project, and it has a deadline of 30th of June to get it done. You have to complete the project by then to actually get the second project. If you don't complete this project, you don't get any more money through TMO. So, therefore, we've had to go to tender without advertising because of the timeframes to be able to meet our commitments to TMO to get this work done. So these run-off, it's the same comment for these run-off all 4 tender exceptions we're putting in.
And it's not planning that's been the issue here, it's just been the time from when they've, well, it is planning is the issue, but the reason for that is that from the time when they've said, yep, here's the money, till now, till project completion is that tight. That
this project was approved in the last week or so. So we put all these on vendor panel, so we used approved suppliers to council for these. We just don't have the time to be able to advertise. That's why I'm bringing the tender exception.
questions? Can I have somebody move it then, please? Councillor Plum, Councillor Hanson seconds. Debate? There being none, I'll put to the vote. Those in favour? Carried 6-0. Councillor Arthur's right on this one. Come back inside, please. Councillor Arthur, you would have just missed an overarching comment about the need for these tender exceptions. They relate to a project that has only received approval in the last number of weeks and has a reporting deadline for completion of 30 June to allow us to be eligible for tranche 2. So whilst we've used whilst the officers have used pre-qualified approval processes, to go to full tender would have severely curtailed our ability to deliver on time. So that was an overarching statement. Now call for, is there anything extra to report, Rick, on 353?
No, same again, Mr Mayor, so this is put out to our pre-qualified suppliers list. And this is the recommendation of the best tender for council.
Okay. Comments? Can I have somebody move? Councillor Plum, second, Councillor Rogers. Debate against? Being none, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. 354. Slightly different, similar issue, but slightly different. Rick, would you like to cover off?
Mr Mayor, the similar, this is the federal government stimulus package, is a different funding bucket for this one. I should have put them in the other order. But same again, this has got to be expended by 30th of June due to the time frames and lead times to actually design all of this different componentry of the sewage plant upgrade would cost us a fair bit of time. So Water and Carbon, who we've been working with for the last 12 months through all of our process with the sewage treatment plant, dealing with the Department of Environment and Science as well. They've come up with a system where we can engage through them to do the upgrades. They've given us a procurement plan which says that they're going to pretty much comply with what our conditions are with local suppliers. So that will give weighting to local suppliers. So they've come to us with, they will control the whole procurement of this as they go and just charge a fee with an open book process.
Okay. Comments? This is the company that's been involved the whole way through the process, so they've done the evaluation, the auctioneering, and now the proposal is that they deliver the project finalisation.
Yes.
Mr Mayor, there's just no cost here, so how are they, or am I missing that?
No, there's not a cost here.
So they do it by, they're going to give us a bill at the end that we don't know anything about, or how?
No, well, it's cost plus with open book, just wondering what the plus is.
Yeah.
Cost is under the local law arrangement, so it's their published
Contract, 10
contract price. But
risk finding. Which is fully recovered from them.
Yes.
So it's funded, there's no extra budgetary implications because it comes within the money that we've received for the project.
The Water and Carbon, Mr Mayor,
Their cost, processing and the administration fee will be recovered from the funding.
So they can't go over the funding that we've received. What you're saying is that,
I won't say that it won't, if there's overruns in the project, that it won't cost more, but what I mean is their fee is a recoverable fee under the terms of the funding arrangement.
It is a recoverable fee. Everything's recoverable under the grant. And yes, Brett's right, it's under a local buy arrangement, so there'll be set fees as per the local buy arrangement. There'll be reports presented to council on what that fee is as we go. I just haven't got that. I thought I put it in the big tin can.
So they have to be a accredited local buy provider. They go through the same pre-qualification process that our graders and land hire do, where they've got to have a disclosed approved price. So it's that pre-qualified price that they charge. Is that what you're saying, Brett?
yeah, so we're approving for them to manage the process at their local buy rates, whatever their hourly rates are. And then they will manage the tender process for the contractors, but that will come back to council.
oh, so they're more of a project
Management
role.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
they're not building anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're like the architects, they're the,
So the project
Design.
cost will still come to us as a tender down the track. Is that right?
Yeah, so they'll manage the whole process, they'll project manage it, they'll do the contract management as well.
So when they call for the tenders to construct something, we still approve that, the actual selection of the tenderer?
Yeah, and it'll probably come through as a tender exception, same as what we've done now, where we haven't got time to design, advertise. They'll run all that procurement process, they'll put it out themselves.
But it'll still come, they'll put a report up for us to recommend the adoption of XYZ company to construct a
Well, that's
whatever.
my understanding. It may need our session approval, depending on time frame.
The council's still going to have control of who gets what.
Yes.
Yes.
and the money, because we don't, yeah, obviously there's going to be $2.5 million that we'll spend, so it needs to come back to council and authorise that expenditure.
Mr Mayor, the Water and Carbon Group, where are they based?
Britain?
Is our local
No,
engineering firm,
doesn't have the capacity.
that's my question, they have not got the capacity. to-
That's why this group was involved, sorry, but that's why we involved them in the first place.
Yeah, the capability is the big thing. They are local engineering firm, don't have the capability to do this type of
So this motion is to give this group project management of the whole project we're doing.
Project and contract management. So they'll ensure contract compliance, that sort of stuff. Is that right? That's what I just heard. Yeah.
But you did say the contracts will come back to us.
The decision on who's engaged will be authorised through our procurement processes. So if it's a big one, it comes to here. If it's one that within the CEO's delegated authority, will go to the CEO, who has to operate within the framework of our procurement policy, which ensures local, bad use of words, local content.
Mr. Mayor, some of this work is very specialised in tertiary filtering and that sort of stuff. These guys deal with this day in, day out. They've got contacts on who the best suppliers of those things are, what SCADA goes with it, all that sort of thing. So we're relying on their expertise.
The big ticket items here, there's no local firm that has, most likely no local firm that has the capacity to provide anyway. It's more of the...
For those sort of off-the-shelf type things, but they're certainly very in-town local contact friendliness. So concrete supply, all that sort of stuff.
plumbing installation. Further questions? Is there a mover? One, second Hanson. Comment against? Those in favour? I'll just recall that vote. Those in
I
favour?
think, Mr. Mayor, can I just say one comment? If they're going to be as a project manager, the motion there says that we're giving the Water and Carbon Group an arrangement to upgrade the Barkwater and sewage treatment plant and associated works. Do you think you should have in there that they will be the project manager?
We can add or change that arrangement to manage the upgrade.
To project manage the upgrade of the Barkwater sewage treatment plant and associated works.
Yep.
Councillor Plum, are you comfortable with the amendment to the resolution? Councillor Hanson, I'd like need to debate the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, this needs all after my crack.
Thank you. I will put the resolution again. Those in favour? 7-0. We've got time for one more before lunch. Sorry, Damien, that means you're going to have to be nervous for another 45 minutes. One more. Okay, this relates to the first two that we've adopted. I think just for transparency, if you could just, we're engaging a non-local here in this case. They're obviously on our pre-qualified supplier list. The reason for that?
Mr. Mayor, with this one, again, it was looking like it was going to go to $200,000. We haven't got time to advertise. We need a grader out there very shortly, if not now. We need 2 graders, wet hire. There's, with the amount of work we've got going on at the moment, one of my engineers in control of these jobs thought that we wouldn't be able to get them locally, so we put it outside as well to the next level out. We received 2 tenderers. One came back with which was a local with one grader, and these guys came back with being able to supply 2 graders. There's a substantial difference in the price of one grader. So had it been close, we would have gone back and negotiated having one grader local and the other grader external, but there's a substantial difference in the price.
And there's also would be a difference in when you're dealing with one company to provide 2 as opposed to 1.
Yeah. And the other one wasn't available until at least mid-March.
Right, and you want to commence their operations when? Now. Okay. So really,
As soon as this is put through, Mr. Mayor.
it wasn't, but it was a slightly non-conforming in that they couldn't start when they were called to start, and they didn't have the number of,
That's right.
they didn't have the 2 which was required, and they couldn't start for a month after we needed them.
That's correct.
I've got no problem with not having 2. If we could have employed one local, I'd have been fine with that, but the mid-March, you're saying that they couldn't get there 2 when you require them quickly.
Yes.
We've got to be, Mr. Mayor, you know, there's definitely no locals that we could use here on with these 2 graders. There's none about.
They didn't put in for it on vendor panel. There was only 2 received.
2 received.
Michael Warren Transport and Personnel Civil and Construction.
And a substantial difference in price as well.
Councillor Gleeson.
The end figure, that 200 and, in the vendor panel there was a top line figure, approximate, you know, $300,000 job or $250,000 job. Gee. Nobody went out and bought a grader to go and do it.
Well, they
No
can't.
locals.
You can't do that. Because you've got to, the equipment's already got to be registered on vendor panel with us. So an existing, you can't go and add additional plant. 100%. You've got how periodic can you add fleet?
Every 12 months.
Every 12 months. We don't, simply don't allow it. You can replace like for like. You're allowed to upgrade your plant. And you still have to provide us details of what your new equipment is, but that's your decision. But if you own one grader registered to us on vendor panel, we have the serial numbers, we have all of the information. You can't just go and add a second one and quote for a job.
In a 12-month period.
Yeah, that's right. It used to be 2 years, we shortened it to 12 months.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we get busy like times like this, and it's a matter for another debate another day, probably does hamper.
Definitely. That's my argument. There'd be people out there, local contractors out there, that if they possibly could, they could go to Landtrack and hire another machine and get another operator and go and do their job.
So part of the way we look to review, remember we discussed our procurement plan as a lot of the procurement policy. That's part of the benefit of moving to a system like that where you can foreshadow 12 months, 2 years in advance, sit down to all your suppliers and say, this is the work we've got coming up. You find a way to adjust your capacity to respond so that they can, like if we could have foreshadowed to them 12 months ago this was coming, which obviously we could not because 12 months ago we didn't know we had the job, but you know, it would then may allow for us to relax that adding. There's from memory, it was an administrative reason we limited that because otherwise people were just adding plant. Brett, can you enlighten us? They were just adding plant willy-nilly, weren't they, and cutting.
Well, the tender process involves checking insurance, registrations, safety aspects of the plan. So if you add a new plant, then that plant hasn't gone through that process, checking process.
So if you have a grader breakdown, it's okay to go and hire one to replace it, but you've still got to notify our officers of what the replacement machine is. But you're right, and the Chief Engineer's right. We have to ensure that our system is rigid enough to stop high administrative burden, but flexible enough to allow someone to adapt. Like that said, in fairness about the foreshadowing thing, I haven't seen a gazette that I've written a piece for in the last 12 months, 10 months that I've been doing it, that hasn't told everyone how many. You know, we've actually written the figure $60 million worth of flood damage. We've written the figure $40 million worth. So we've been telling everybody that there's $100 million worth of work out there. And to this day, I still don't know of a gear up that's occurred.
Yes, I'm geared down.
That's right, that is exactly right. There's been more of a movement within our contractors to gear down than there has been to gear up.
I think, thanks for clearing that up.
Mr Mayor, just thinking about that while we've been discussing it, you know, we can have exemptions here on our process of the 200,000, not going to tender. I think maybe we judge it on, you know, as merits basis, that if we get into this situation, that maybe we should be able to have an exemption where we do allow to get away from our policy, to allow some of our local contractors, if they want, to maybe buy that piece of plant that we require.
I don't disagree. I think there's some broader complexity around that we need to assess in more detail via our procurement plan and our pre-qualified supplier basis. I'd be nervous. I think broadly it sounds like a really good idea. The implications we need to consider are when we're not blessed with work, a relatively big operator just shutting the small operators out by winning every job and just getting enough fleet, you know, doing the toll mentality, just buy everybody out by either competing, offering them a ridiculously small price to buy them out, or just flooding the council area with equipment and charging it at a price that the locals can't compete with.
And that's why that's in that
It's exactly one of the
policy at the moment. Yeah.
So apart from the administrative costs, there was certainly the basis we need to protect people who've got one piece of machinery
Agreed.
from unfair trading practices from competitors. So I think
This is a
it's
problem
like
we don't
making
have very often.
it's like making policy about it's like making taxation policy when you're in the middle of a really good economic boom. Sounds okay to take a lot of money, but when times turn down, you still want a high taxation rate. It's probably the same here. We've got to ensure that we don't introduce a policy that allows for unfair competitive practices in times when we don't have $100 million worth of work in front of us over the next 2 years.
I appreciate
So
that
it's a
too.
juggling act, and I fully support what the officers have proposed in this individual instance because of the availability of time. And secondly, was there a contingent thing, Purcell, you know, they tended for 2. If we cut it, they may have, we don't know, but they may have said, well, I'm not sending one grader out there. So the job called for 2, not 1, and to work, you know, we would have had to renegotiate again through vendor panel. Are you still willing to provide 1 if we only take 1? Especially when you were way cheaper than the local intended, you know, you've got a difficult conversation to have there, full stop.
And if we had gone to tender, they probably would have come back to us anyway, because out of the 200,000. Yeah. But the only other thing there I'd raise, Mr Mayor, is when we're looking at nearly spending $300,000, is it worthwhile us considering getting ourselves another grader?
Off-roads are the issue, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, we've got a fleet of 8 now, and we struggle to keep 8 operators on them. We introduce another one, even if we find one, and then all of a sudden we lose that $100 million worth of work. We've got 9 graders and 9 grader operators, and they're sitting there looking at each other. There's a contractor not working, in fact. So, once again, that balancing act of, yes, at the moment we can handle 19 graders.
Yeah, we do renew some of our plant and get rid of some of the old stuff too once the quietens down.
Correct, but we've got a skilled operator then that's being paid to drive a grader when he's driving the roller. Councillor Gleeson, we didn't hear that, but we don't want to. Any further discussion on this resolution? Do I have a mover? One, seconder. Any formal debate against? I think it was a very broad range of conversation had about Gleeson, sorry. And it does highlight some of the issues that we've had. Those in favour? 6-0. Adjourn for lunch, 12:29.